take a slow breath. Let the weight of the day soften. Here, in this quiet corner of words and wonder, stories unfold like incense in the dark gently, without force. If you find yourself drawn to truths wrapped in human longing, you're in the right place. Subscribe and let the stillness speak. In a city that never quite sleeps, where neon lights hum and hearts flicker with unspoken desires, there lived a woman named Lila. She was 32, a graphic designer with a sharp eye for beauty and a heart that felt too much. Lila's life was a mosaic of half-finished dreams, her cozy apartment filled with sketches, scented candles, and a lingering ache she couldn't name. She was married to Ethan, a kind but distracted man who worked late hours at a tech startup. Their love, once a wildfire, had softened into embers warm but no longer consuming. Lila's days were a rhythm of deadlines and coffee runs, but her nights were different. Alone in their apartment, with Ethan buried in code or meetings, she found herself turning to moments of private release. It wasn't just about pleasure. It was a way to quiet the restlessness, to drown out the questions that crept in. Why did she feel so empty? Why did their marriage feel like a house with too many locked doors? Masturbation became her secret ritual, a fleeting escape from the weight of her unspoken needs. But each time the relief faded, leaving her more hollow than before. Across town, Lila's best friend, Maya, was navigating her own storm. Maya was single, fiercely independent, and a corporate lawyer who thrived on control. But beneath her polished exterior, she was entangled with a married colleague, Daniel. Their affair was a dangerous dance, stolen glances in boardrooms, late-night texts, and hotel rooms that smelled of guilt and perfume. For Maya, masturbation was a way to hold on to Daniel when he wasn't there, a way to replay their moments together. But it also tethered her to a cycle of longing and shame, a craving that never seemed to end. One evening, Lila and Maya met at their favorite wine bar, a dimly lit haven where they could shed their masks. Over glasses of Merlot, Lila confessed her private ritual, her voice low, as if the words might break something sacred. Maya, usually so composed, leaned forward, her eyes softening. She admitted her own struggles, how her nights alone were filled with fantasies of Daniel, how she used those moments to feel close to him, only to wake up feeling further away. They laughed a little nervously at how their secrets mirrored each other. But beneath the laughter, there was a shared recognition. Something about these acts, though intimate, felt like chasing shadows. What neither of them realized was how their stories were threads in a larger tapestry, one that Buddhist wisdom might call Samsaric. Samsara, the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, is driven by craving, by the endless pursuit of fleeting pleasures. Lila's solitary moments and Maya's forbidden fantasies were not just personal habits. They were expressions of a deeper human tendency to seek fulfillment in what is temporary. In the quiet of their wine-soaked confessions, they were brushing against a truth. Their actions, though private, were keeping them bound to a cycle of wanting, never quite arriving. Let's continue the story, flowing gently like a river, carrying us deeper into Lila and Maya's world and the wisdom that might light their way. Lila returned home that night, the wine still warm in her veins, Maya's words echoing in her mind. She slipped into bed beside Ethan, who was already asleep, his laptop glowing faintly on the nightstand. The space between them felt vast, not just physical, but emotional, a chasm widened by unspoken truths. Lila lay awake, wondering when their marriage had become a series of polite routines. She thought of her private moments, how they offered a spark of control in a life that felt increasingly adrift. But the Buddhist teachings she'd once read in a mindfulness book whispered to her now. Attachment to pleasure, even in solitude, is a knot that binds us to suffering. Across the city, Maya was in her sleek apartment, staring at her phone, waiting for a message from Daniel that never came. He was with his wife tonight, no doubt, and the thought twisted in her like a thorn. She poured another glass of wine, her fingers hovering over her phone, tempted to text him. Instead, she turned to her familiar ritual, imagining his touch, his voice. But as the wave of release faded, she felt the familiar ache, her heart still tethered to a man who could never fully be hers. In that moment, she remembered a phrase from a meditation retreat she'd attended years ago. Craving is the root of suffering. Was this what it meant? To be caught in a loop of wanting what could never satisfy. The next day, Lila and Maya met for coffee, their conversation picking up where the wine bar left off. Lila shared how her moments alone were starting to feel like a confession of loneliness, a way to fill the void Ethan no longer seemed to notice. Maya nodded, her eyes distant, admitting that her affair with Daniel was less about love and more about chasing a feeling, a high that always crashed. They both wanted out of these cycles, but how? The Buddhist lens offered clarity. Their actions were samsaric because they were driven by tanha, the thirst for sensory pleasure, for validation, for escape. But the path to freedom wasn't about shame or suppression, it was about transformation. Buddhist wisdom teaches that nothing is inherently good or bad. It's our relationship to it that matters. Masturbation, like any act, can be samsaric when it's a compulsive grasp at fleeting relief, reinforcing the illusion that happiness lies outside us. But it can also be sacred, a mindful act of self-compassion, a way to honor the body's needs without clinging to the outcome. Lila and Maya, in their own ways, were beginning to see this. Their private rituals weren't the problem. It was the unconscious craving behind them, the belief that these moments could fill the deeper voids in their hearts. Here are 3 ways to transform this samsaric cycle into something sacred, rooted in Buddhist principles. First, practice mindfulness. Instead of using these moments as an escape, bring full awareness to them. Notice the sensations, the emotions, the thoughts that arise without judgment. Lila could pause before her ritual, asking herself, "What am I truly seeking?" By observing her intentions, she might uncover the loneliness beneath her actions and choose to address it directly, perhaps by talking to Ethan or journaling her feelings. Second, cultivate self-compassion. Maya's shame about her fantasies stemmed from a belief that she was wrong for wanting Daniel. But Buddhism teaches us to meet ourselves with kindness. She could reframe her moments alone as acts of self-care, not betrayal, letting go of the guilt that kept her tethered to suffering. By treating herself with the same tenderness she craved from Daniel, she might begin to loosen his hold on her heart. Third, redirect the energy. The desire behind these acts is a powerful force, and Buddhism encourages channeling it toward liberation. Lila could dedicate the peace she feels post-release to a higher intention, like deepening her connection with Ethan or nurturing her creativity. Maya could use her longing for Daniel as a reminder to seek connection within herself, perhaps through meditation or creative expression, turning a fleeting pleasure into a step toward. As Lila and Maya sipped their coffee, they made a pact. They'd try these practices, not to erase their habits, but to understand them. Lila promised to talk to Ethan, to bridge the gap between them. Maya vowed to set boundaries with Daniel, to reclaim her heart from the affair's grip. Their journey was just beginning, but for the first time, they felt a flicker of hope, a sense that even their most private struggles could lead them towards something. The story flows on, carrying Lila and Maya through the tangle of their desires, guided by the quiet wisdom that promises a way through. The following week, Lila sat across from Ethan at their small dining table, a rare evening when he wasn't tethered to his laptop. The air felt heavy, not with anger but with the weight of things unsaid. She took a breath, her heart racing, and spoke about the distance she felt, how their marriage had become a shadow of what it once was. Ethan's eyes widened, surprised but not defensive. He admitted he'd been lost in work, chasing promotions to feel worthy of her, unaware of how it pushed her away. They talked late into the night, their words raw and clumsy but honest. Lila shared her private rituals, not in detail, but enough to let him see her loneliness. Ethan reached for her hand, promising to show up more, not just in body, but in heart. That same evening, Maya sat alone in her apartment, her phone silent. She'd told Daniel they needed space, a decision that felt like cutting a piece of herself away. The ache was sharp, but she refused to fill it with her usual escape. Instead, she lit a candle, sat cross-legged on her rug, and tried the first practice, mindfulness. As she breathed, she noticed the pull of her longing for Daniel, the way it coiled in her chest. Instead of pushing it away or indulging it, she watched it, like clouds passing in a vast sky. For the first time, she saw her desire not as a chain, but as a teacher, pointing her toward her own unmet needs. Days turned into weeks, and both women began to shift. Lila and Ethan started small rituals together, cooking dinner, sharing a glass of wine, touching each other with intention rather than habit. Lila found herself approaching her private moments differently, too. Instead of a frantic escape, she slowed down, asking herself what she needed beyond the physical. Sometimes it led her to sketch late into the night, pouring her restlessness into art. Other times it led her to Ethan, their intimacy rekindling not just in bed, but in the quiet moments of being seen. Maya, meanwhile, leaned into self-compassion. She wrote letters to herself, forgiving the parts that felt weak for loving Daniel. She began to see her solo rituals as acts of care, not shame, letting go of the story that she was less than for being alone. She also redirected her energy, signing up for a pottery class she'd always wanted to try. The clay under her fingers felt grounding, a reminder that she could create beauty from her own hands, not just from someone else's touch. But the path wasn't linear. Lila had nights when old doubts crept in, when Ethan's late hours triggered her fears of being unseen. Maya slipped once, texting Daniel in a moment of weakness, only to feel the familiar sting of emptiness afterward. Yet Buddhist teachings remind us that samsara isn't escaped in a single leap. It's a spiral, a gradual unwinding. Each stumble was a chance to practice again, to meet themselves with kindness rather than judgment. The second practice, self-compassion, became their anchor. Lila began meditating each morning, even for just 5 minutes, whispering to herself, "You are enough." It softened the edges of her loneliness, letting her see Ethan's efforts as love, not obligation. Maya carried a small stone in her pocket, a reminder to be gentle with herself when thoughts of Daniel surfaced. She'd hold it, breathe, and choose to let the craving pass, trusting that her worth didn't depend on his attention. The third practice, redirecting energy, opened new doors. Layla channeled her creative spark into a new project, designing a series of prints inspired by Buddhist mandalas, each one a meditation on impermanence. Maya found herself writing poetry in her pottery class, words that captured her longing and transformed it into something beautiful. These acts didn't erase their struggles, but gave them a new shape, like water finding a new path through stone. One evening, Lila and Maya met again at the wine bar, their faces softer, their laughter lighter. They shared their small victories and setbacks, marveling at how their private acts, once sources of shame, were becoming moments of clarity. They weren't free of samsara, not yet, but they were learning to dance with it, to see their desires as invitations to grow, rather than chains to break. The Buddhist path wasn't about denying pleasure, but about meeting it with awareness, with love, with intention. The river of the story carries us to its close, weaving the threads of Lila and Maya's journeys into a tapestry of insight and possibility, grounded in the quiet wisdom of transformation. Months later, Lila and Ethan were finding a new rhythm. Their marriage wasn't perfect. There were still nights when work pulled Ethan away or when Lila's doubts whispered, but they were learning to meet those moments with honesty. Layla's mindfulness practice had deepened. She now saw her private rituals as a way to connect with herself, not escape. When she touched her body, it was with gratitude, a celebration of being alive rather than a flight from loneliness. She and Ethan had started a weekly ritual of their own, a no-screens night where they'd talk, laugh, or simply sit in silence, rediscovering the warmth of presence. The Buddhist teaching of impermanence became her guide. Nothing, not even their struggles, would last forever, so she chose to meet each moment fully. Maya, too, was carving a new path. She'd ended things with Daniel for good, not with anger, but with clarity. The pottery class had become her sanctuary, a place where her hands shaped clay and her heart shaped new dreams. Her solo moments were no longer about chasing Daniel's ghost, but about honoring her own body, her own fire. She'd taken up meditation too, finding that sitting with her breath helped her see her cravings as waves, not walls. The Buddhist principle of non-attachment didn't mean she stopped wanting. It meant she stopped letting her wants define her. She was beginning to see herself as whole, not a fragment waiting for someone else to complete. One crisp autumn evening, Lila and Maya walked through a park, leaves crunching under their feet. They spoke of how far they'd come, how their private struggles had led them to deeper truths. Lila shared how she'd begun to see her body as a temple, not a battleground, and how that shift had softened her marriage's edges. Maya laughed, admitting she'd written a poem about her pottery wheel, calling it a spinning mandala that taught her to let go. They both felt it. The sacred wasn't somewhere else. It was in the mess of their human lives, in the courage to face their desires without being consumed by them. Buddhist wisdom offers a final insight here. To make anything sacred is to meet it with intention, to see it as part of the path to awakening. Masturbation, like any act, can be samsaric when it's a blind grasp at relief, but it becomes sacred when approached with mindfulness, self-compassion, and purpose. Lila and Maya were learning this, not as a rule to follow, but as a practice to live. Their journeys weren't over. Samsara's pull is strong, but they were no longer running from it. They were walking step by mindful step toward freedom. Here are 3 final techniques to make this intimate act sacred, drawn from the well of Buddhist teachings. First, set an intention. Before engaging, pause to ask, what is my heart seeking? Dedicate the act to self-love, healing, or understanding, transforming it from a reaction to a ritual. Lila found this shifted her experience from escape to empowerment, aligning her with her deeper values. Second, practice presence. Bring your full attention to the moment, every sensation, every breath. Let go of fantasies that pull you elsewhere, and instead anchor in your body. Maya discovered this made her feel whole, not fragmented, as if she were meeting herself for the first time. Third, release attachment to the outcome. Pleasure is fleeting, and chasing it can trap us in Samsara's cycle. After the act, let the feeling go without clinging, offering gratitude for the moment instead. Both women found this freed them from the need to fix themselves through pleasure, opening space for deeper peace. As Lila and Maya stood under the park's golden trees, they felt a quiet strength. They weren't saints or sages, just 2 women learning to navigate their desires with grace. Their stories, like all human stories, were threads in the great tapestry of Samsara, but they were weaving them with intention now, stitch by sacred stitch. If something in this story stayed with you, don't keep it quiet. Share it. Someone else may be waiting for just this kind of reminder. Subscribe for more stories where heartache meets healing and the unseen becomes known. Remember, even the darkest entanglements can lead us back to light.